got dirt on me, I got dirt on you. So let's keep this clean. It's not like we ain't got nothing to lose.
So how you doing, sir? Congratulations on the first few singles. I'm loving them to bits.
Nice one, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing good. I feel a little bit, a bit. I don't know what the word is because I feel like I love doing this because it feels like this is the bit that I'm meant to be around for. This is my calling on planet Earth, talking about music and writing music. But then the rest of the day, I work in admin for the NHS, so I've just taken off my Clark Kent glasses and put on my
Yeah.
How and Hum glasses. So I feel a little bit
Oh,
a bit multi-personality at the moment, but good in
yeah, I
general.
can imagine. So, but how do you juggle that? Because I mean, because I know that like when I had this interview, so I'm a translator by day as well. So I'm kind of like I'm doing that at the same time. I'm kind of thinking of questions I'm going to be asking later and things like that. So how do you kind of work your day to day, especially now that you've got this album coming out and when you've been writing songs and stuff like that? How do you manage to kind of I don't know. Do you manage to switch off at all while you're working in admin? I imagine you have to, no?
I think it's more about like complete division. Like I have to leave that dude behind. I'm quite good at sort of separating my time. But the album was written like early last year and recorded sort of over that summer. So the recording process for the album and stuff is behind me. I'm now in sort of marketing mode, and it's really boring. But a lot of trying to sell your album on social media or like organize all this other stuff isn't too dissimilar to the admin that I do in my day-to-day job.
All
So
right.
it's not too different a hat I have to put on these days, which is like I think it says something for the creativity of marketing. And I'm sure there's probably a better way to do it. But yeah, these days I don't feel like I'm not completely splitting myself. I'm not two entirely different people. So it's all right. It's bearable.
I mean, obviously, I want to talk about the music as well, but I know that just today, you've just literally like about an hour ago posted on Instagram and the like that the pre-orders are open. So can you tell me a little bit because it's an interesting story about some of the little things that you've got going on there with the t-shirt design and the kind of the tarot. That's a really interesting story. Can you tell me a little bit about how that all that came about?
Yeah, so well, a lot of the album was inspired by. Um, okay, well, I guess there's a bigger answer to this. So, the first album was very looking back. It's very much like I'm going to look back and assess what has happened to me in the past and work out who that has, made me become. And I thought, well, if I'm going to write a second album, then I'd much rather it were the opposite of that. So, album two was much more about future facing, who I'm going to be, how I'm going to be remembered. And the thing that through talking to a lot of friends and also getting really interested in a lot of the imagery online, tarot cards and tarot reading and the idea of future telling became really interesting to me. And I started to get really obsessed with the old Rider Waite, the sort of classic tarot design. I don't have any on me, but I've got a couple of sets downstairs. But the old designs and stuff really fitted into a lot of English folklore. Like I think a lot of the designs are borrowed from it and influenced by it, and I found that really interesting, especially when trying to reassess sort of the musical roots and trying to get to like the heart of who I was, including my own Britishness. And so there was sort of like a lot of floating themes around those sorts of things. But I started to explore tarot. There's a couple of references to tarot in the lyrics of the album, just sort of dotted about. And I love the idea that we never really know what's going to happen, and this future seems so unending. But there's like a portion of society that promises that they know what's in your best interest, and they know what's going to come. And I find that fascinating, and tried to play that against itself. And then while I was getting ready for this album, I was playing a show with my friend Eleanor Moss, who's an amazing singer, who features heavily on the album and helped me write a few of the songs. And at the gig she was doing in London, she had invited along a friend of hers, Chris Riddell, who's an illustrator, amazing illustrator, and he was drawing the gig. He had a projector sort of behind her at the St Pancras Old Church, and he was drawing drawing his way through the songs as he was going. And it was amazing to watch. He's like just the most incredible illustrator, and he started doing it for my songs as well. We got along really well that evening at that gig. We stayed in touch, we were speaking on email. I started explaining this tarot thing, and it turns out he was already designing some tarot cards for his own project as an illustrator, and it just worked out. So he actually sent me 12 tarot drawings, one for each of the songs. So each one has a different individual design. I don't know yet what we're going to do with all of them, but Dirt was the one that he finished first, so that one came out with the album, and it is this unbelievably cool drawing of the Grim Reaper digging up his
Oh
own.
yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, I read that, and he was tagged in the Instagram post. So I had a look through them, and it's in full color as well on his Instagram. It's a beautiful picture. Yeah.
It's so
So
cool.
so that one's going to actually come with the album, but then you're going to try and work in the other ones maybe a bit later on with something
I'd
else.
love to. I'd love to do actual tarot cards. I'd love to actually make them and make them sort of like collectible designs because the color ones are so cool. I thought it looked a little more the Howl and the Hum in black and white on the merchandise, but the full color one is so beautiful. So I think we're going to do something with all of them and make them really bright and vivid and cool, and we'll work out what to do with them. But there's a lot of we're going to have some special editions coming out with the album and things like that. You can tell I'm in marketing mode still. I've been talking to
No, but I mean, but
our
you completely
distributor.
need to be these days because it's just
Yeah.
if you want to get your album out there, you just I think more important than the music. It's unfortunately more important than the music is to get it out there with all these marketing ploys now. So that must be everything that you're thinking about right now, no?
Yeah, exactly. It's weird because I'd much rather be just constantly thinking about new lyrics, but it's so difficult to turn back into the person that creates the music as opposed to the person that has to sell it. But I think these days you've got to be both. You've got to be like you've got to be the person that makes the furniture as well as the guy in the market selling the furniture. You've got to be all of these dudes, and it's a sort of multi-headed beast these days. But it's a challenge, and it's a challenge that at times I find really welcome. At times it's really straining because I'm also doing the thing that I have to do for money the rest of the time because the
Yeah,
music is
sure.
a bit buggered these days. But it's it's an exciting challenge, and when it goes right, it goes really right, and it feels great.
Huh. I love the fact that you mentioned there that you're kind of into tarot and folklore and things like that because a lot of the lyrics from at least from the recent singles, we get mentions of like sharing Netflix and all these kind of things, all these modern, kind of modern things that we have. So would you say that you were influenced more so by folklore than you try and kind of blend the two together in the lyrics? Because you mentioned that you do talk about tarot and things like that in the lyrics as well on the album.
I think the thematically, I'm really interested in the wider reaching things of things like tarot and future telling and fortunes. And in terms of the mythology, I was really interested in the visuals and the tactility of um, British folklore, especially British and Welsh and Celtic, old Celtic myths and things. That's just stuff that I've really been into for ages. I think there's something really beautiful and mystical about it. And I got really into that sort of mystical fiction and magic realism and stuff while I was writing the album. But in its reality, the album is very much set in sort of, dingy bedrooms around the UK. And I'm proud, like a friend described my music as inherently British the other day, and I took a lot of pride in that because I think there are quite a lot of very British, very modern themes and place settings. But in its themes, I'd like to think they're that little bit more far-reaching and a bit wider and a bit older. I think the themes are a bit more ancient, but the settings are very present, basically. Like a lot of the songs are sort of set within phones or message screens or like there's stuff about like Netflix and Pornhub and stuff like that. There's all of these references throughout the album to very very modern things, but I'd like to think that a lot of the emotions and behaviors are much more ancient.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, it's curious you say that. I mean, I'm originally from Huddersfield, so I'm not too far from you. But I live in the Basque Country now, in Bilbao, in the north of Spain.
Oh.
So when I do listen to that, I do really kind of feel like it's taking me back to my roots, definitely, yeah. Would you say that's maybe more of a northern thing that's kind of make you feel you want to write more? You said Wales as well, kind of the Welsh and
Yeah.
kind of English folklore.
I guess whenever I sit down to start writing music, I have to sort of try to remember who I am. So I'm like my family are half Welsh, half English, so I've always got that at the root of me. So I want to take advantage of those and write from those places, and look into my own sort of genealogical history. But also I'm a bit of like a sort of displaced person. I'm a bit of a I've got like a mongrel accent because I came from I sort of grew up all over the place, but Essex was where I spent like high school and stuff, and then I moved up to York when I was 18, and I've lived in Yorkshire ever since. So I've spent all my adult life in Yorkshire, but I moved around a lot, so I never necessarily felt particularly settled, and nor did I feel that one place was my own. So instead, I sort of hoovered all of it up. I just went everywhere and just claimed all of these parts of my as my own culture. But Yorkshire is the place that I call home. It's the place that feels the homeliest, and it's interesting you're saying you're from Huddersfield, which again, it's a place I've been a few times and I really love. I really love, especially the more rural parts of Yorkshire. Are really gorgeous, and there's a lot of driving on the album. A lot of driving around the moors and South Yorkshire. And it all falls into it. I can't necessarily point at a thing and go, this is exactly where this is set. A lot of it is relatively vague, set on motorways and set at service stations and things like that. But the Yorkshire element definitely can't be forgotten. The Welsh element feels a lot more sort of intrinsic. And one day maybe I'll write a little bit more about the Welsh stuff. But yeah,
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about Yorkshire. I mean, there's one of the, I think it's was it on Dirt, or was it Same Mistake Twice? I can't remember. One of the lyrics was that you said that you stayed in Yorkshire to avoid
avoiding.
pain with them or something.
Yeah,
I can't remember exactly the lyric now. Yeah,
you moved to London with everyone else, and I stayed in Yorkshire avoiding success.
that's right. Yeah. Was that something about? Is that actually kind of autobiographical in a way? Do you prefer to stay in Yorkshire, maybe not reach that kind of wide-ranging success that maybe other bands who have moved to London
That was
have
a bit of
achieved?
I think it was a bit of a joke, but it's something that is
Yeah.
true as well. I think it's something that everyone in Yorkshire is aware of, that so many people that they grew up with moved down to London and are on salaries that are like three times theirs, and then eventually like their accent starts to slip and they move further and further away, sort of like spiritually from home. And it's something that I'm very aware of. But again, as a sort of displaced person, as a person that almost feels like they don't really have a home, I do feel like I'm hovering above this situation rather than emotionally within it. But also, it is true. Like, I know loads of people that have left Yorkshire and gone and thrived in London, and it's brilliant. But I'm also not forgetting that there's a real loneliness in being left behind. And so I say, Same Mistake is about like that song is about sort of a bunch of characters. I call it like a safari of people that have been left behind. And in a way it is, but in a way it definitely, and I guess all of the songs on the album definitely come from a really true place within me. They definitely come from things that I have felt, and places where I feel I've been left behind, and people who I feel have left me behind. Because I guess the emotion has to be true to write about it.
I was reading. I think it's like a press release that you there was a quote about you that said the album was about the everyday dread so many of us feel surrounded by screens, showing us how we should be, what a good person is, and what a bad person is. I guess maybe that's why you kind of said that you're kind of floating above everything in a way. You're kind of trying to tell things on your own terms, knowing this album.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. It's I'm definitely not trying to come up with an answer. Like if especially in exploring morality these days, because I'd much rather laugh at the people that really tried to reach an end point with what's good or bad than actually try to define what's good or bad myself, because it's just that it just turns into an internet comment section. It turns into like middle-aged people arguing on Facebook. I think what's much funnier is the actual argument itself, and the process of people trying to reach those conclusions, and also people trying to prove themselves in reality, and people making mistakes. I find people making mistakes so much more interesting than people trying to constantly be good. So I think the album is more sort of a love letter to screwing up in that sense. But I do like the idea of floating above myself. I hadn't seen it from that angle before. That's cool.
Yeah. And I mean, talking about kind of like the modern take and all these kind of different ways we can be in touch with people, you've taken to them quite. I mean, you've always been on there, but I mean, you've been back on X just recently, but you've not used it so much so to promote your music. I mean, I think the first thing that you said was you're back on here just to say that long legs, his legs aren't really that long. So I thought it was really kind of cool, kind of way to say I'm on here, but it's just for the kicks and giggles.
I have no idea. I'm so removed from it. My only real experience with Twitter or X is seeing screenshots of it on Instagram. It's a thing.
Really?
It's a whole world I just don't really get. And because like the others, like okay, it took me ages to get TikTok, but I understand TikTok a bit more. Facebook and Instagram I sort of grew up with, but Twitter, it just seems to be a place where people get it feels like an eternal Facebook comments section. It feels
Yeah.
like people just trying to give the hottest possible take, and it's something that I've yet to it's something I've yet to like find my own voice within. And then the whole Elon Musk thing, I'm not a big fan of, so I needed to just step away from that a little bit. But it's something I haven't got round to yet. So every time, anytime I post on X, it's me trying to sort of like work out exactly who I am within that sphere. And I usually get it wrong, but I am having quite a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, but I think if you're just like posting fun comments and maybe kind of promo and stuff, you don't really. It's more when you try and you start giving opinions. I mean, I often watch a lot of movies and go on there and say what I think of it, and
Good.
I've just decided not to do that anymore because just anyone who hates my opinion of a movie just doesn't agree, and then there's just a mass, this huge mob of Twitter
Yeah.
friends of them just jump on you. So
Yeah, it's
that's my
crazy.
favorite thing.
Negativity in the social media sphere is still one of the funniest things that I've encountered, but I used to be terrified of it, especially around album one, because we'd never really released anything um, in one mass before. We'd released singles, or we released like little live performances and stuff, but we released our album, and when we had like this label services company backing us, and so they put a load of money into the marketing of it. So it started going into people's algorithms and started going out to strangers, and so we started to receive a lot of comments from strangers who fucking hated us, obviously, because not everyone is going to like our music. But I started getting the notifications of these people that were commenting, and I'd sort of like log on and I'd see, and then there were people just like being so openly horrible, and it was like it really took me out of myself because I was just like, people are so mean, man. Like they're just saying this out of nowhere, and they're taking our music out of context, and they're saying that it's like that it's trying to be something else, and they're sort of it's so judgmental. And it took me a long time to get to a place of humor to see that from, because now I see those sorts of comments and I find it really funny that anyone would write that. Like, um, why would I enjoy the opinion of someone that would write something that horrific anyway? Is
Yeah.
is my main view of it these days. But it's a crazy place, and it's the internet is a crazy place, and it's getting crazier. So it's not, to me, it doesn't really, the sort of judgmental arena of it doesn't matter too much. The stakes aren't too high because it's an asylum, because it's mad.
At the same time, you took it quite a risky. There was one quite risky post on Instagram that you were talking about the word crimes. I don't know if you remember, and you said that you didn't really understand why, if you unalive, you use the word unalive. If you unalive someone, that's a crime. But if it's governments or if it's an army,
Mm.
that is not a crime. And then you wrote a song about it. Having this kind of this idea about how people can jump on you as soon as you say anything that they don't like. That was quite a risky move to make as well, no?
Yeah, I hadn't really seen it as risky. That song got a really positive reception, strangely, because I was sort of expecting, if I don't know, maybe I don't know what sort of backlash it would be. To me, it does feel like a little bit of a safe opinion, like death is
Yeah.
bad, war isn't great. So I don't know too many people that would jump against the backlash of it. But yeah, it was the first time I think I had sort of even pointed towards something going on in the world and saying and sort of reflected my own opinion on it for sure. And that felt quite vulnerable. I think being vulnerable on the internet is quite rare for me because usually I'm in marketing mode. I've
Yeah.
got my
No, but you made a perfect point there, completely justified. But it's just in this Trump Biden world we live in, it's just so easy for people who are just completely
yeah,
other minded people, but just find
yeah.
those things so perfect to jump on.
No, you're totally right. You're totally right. Luckily, I've experienced sort of nothing, no real negative feedback for that song. But I did a song that did quite well on TikTok recently, and it just because it just got like a huge amount of views, and then after a while, it got like over 1 million views, which I'm really happy with. But then the bots started, and so I just had all these
Right.
people commenting Trump and reform in the comments, and I was like, on a song called "No Calories in Cocaine," I think you couldn't be like less relevant. This is so the wrong place for that. But yeah, that was strange seeing all of those comments pile in because I was like, it just enforced the argument the internet is a wild place. But yeah, it means it's worth writing about, doesn't it?
Definitely. So, I mean, tell me a little bit about how I want to talk more about the music, how the album writing process has been this time round compared to the first one, specifically because it's called Same Mistake Twice, which is quite a curious
Mm.
title to give your second album, no?
Yeah, I mean that was it was a bit of a joke choice.
Sure.
It was after I'd written the song "Same Mistake Twice," which is a line I'm still proud of the line, and it's the line that's going to open the album. I never make the same mistake twice. I always aim for a third time. But um, the first album was mainly it was written when the band was a four piece, when they were sort of like it was sort of we call it the four original members, but really it started as me, and then it grew to me and a bass player, and then it grew to me, a bass player and a drummer, and then a guitarist, sorry, and then it grew to a variety of sort of Spinal Tap esque lineup of drummers, which each of them sort of combusted, and then we had one lineup for like I think 6 years. We had there with the four of us, so a long time. And the songwriting process for that was usually just me sitting in a room on a piano or with a guitar, and sort of trying to work out the skeleton of the song, which is to me the lyrics, the melodic movement, and the chords of the song. And nothing about that process has really changed. There's a lot of collaborators on this album, and a lot of people who will appear on the publishing credits of it because I worked with a lot of people while I was writing this. But at the end of the day, the core, the skeleton of the songs were usually written on my own. A few of them were written with our old guitar player Connor also in the room, just fleshing out the ideas. But it's sort of like the skeleton has to be right before we start building on it. The core of the song itself, the sort of impetus and the meaning of the lyrics and the real driving point of the song has to be right before we start building on it. And we've always done that. That's always sort of been a rule. And it was just interesting building it, like fleshing it out with different people this time because we got so into a cycle of the way that we were doing it with album one, and the songs were always going down a certain route. Whereas for album two, we sort of swept everything off the table and went, maybe that isn't the only way to do it. And so we started adding a lot more natural instruments. Album one was a lot more synth heavy. Album two
Yeah, I
was
was
a
going
lot.
to say it's what kind of a lot more poppy drum beats and things like that. And they wrote on the first album, where the first three songs that I've heard more was the guitar. We had plenty of saxophone there, and yeah,
Yeah,
it sounds you, but it's very different at the same time. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I think it's the voice that ties it together.
Yeah.
My songwriting is always evolving. It's always it's moving on slightly. I think the songs for album two are different to album one, but the voice ties it all in, and there's still sort of a sense of vulnerability at the heart of all of it. But yeah, the music sort of washes all over it, and I would never want to release the same album twice.
Sure.
I'm glad we are moving away from the things that we did on album one, not in a negative way, but in an evolution.
Mhm. I mean, maybe I'm just completely reading between the lines. Like, obviously, you said you don't want to release two on the same albums now, or one on the same albums between two. But Dirt feels to me in a round. I mean, maybe it's just me reading between the lines again, but it feels almost like a companion piece to Hostages in a way,
Oh wow,
lyrically.
a couple of people have said that about those songs. I mean, I'm very proud of both of them. They're about different relationships. But yeah, I guess the sort of breakup element of it and trying to take a wry view of moving on, there's definitely themes that link the two. Um, they're I'm very proud of both of those songs and very proud of them for different reasons, for sure. But strangely, when I write, songs usually do go in pairs. I mean, those songs are written a very long time apart from each other.
Mhm.
But usually, I have two songs on the go at once, and they're the two songs that I sort of consider in fusion. So at the time, it was "Dirt" and a song that's going to come out with the album called "All Your Friends Hate Me." Which is again not a very kind song to myself, but yeah, that's also about a particular view to have on a relationship. And yeah, to me, the songs always have to sort of exist in two. I don't really know why.
Mhm. And I want to go back to something that you mentioned at the beginning. You said that when you write songs, you think about yourself now, but you also like to sort of picture yourself how people will see you in the future.
Hmm.
I mean, you're very young. You're a lot younger than me, I think. Where does that kind of future, forward thinking come from? And how do you kind of imagine to picture yourself in how you'd like to be in like 20, 30 years time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a really scary question, isn't it? I had a chat with a friend a while ago, and they asked. the question, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Where do you see yourself in 15 years? And I found the question so intimidating that it really sort of shook me to my core for a long time, because I couldn't see anything. Because I try to plan things for like the eventuality. I try to plan things for how I would like to imagine my life, but they just seem like dreams. Nothing about it seems very real. Nothing about it seems like, if I do this, this, and this, then I will end up here. It all seems like sort of like casting out these imaginary nets and hoping something gets dragged in. So I guess with this album, it was much more about, um, if I do something bad now, how will it affect me in 10 to 15 years?
Right.
Like how much do our sins stay with us and how much do our bad memories stay with us? And I think that's, I guess, where the morality stuff comes in. It's only since the album was finished I started to think a lot more about, well, who am I actually going to be in 10, 15 years, rather than letting the ghost of who I was haunt me, you know, after those actions have been done. Who am I going to be in 10 to 15 years? Will I have changed as a person? How will I look back on my life? And I realized that a lot of that then comes sort of full circle back to Same Mistake Twice, where and I realized that that's why the album is cyclical, and I think that's why I called it Same Mistake Twice, because at the end of the day, you're always coming back to route one. You're always coming back to, however much you look forward, it's almost like the political spectrum. It's going to come back around and hit you in the arse.
Yeah. Everything comes full circle, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't want to keep you too much, and I don't want to keep my 1-year-old nephew too much. So just kind of to finish off, obviously when the previous album came out, it was right slap bang in the middle of COVID. So I mean, that was difficult in itself, but it was also difficult to kind of know how it was going to be appreciated, accepted, because you haven't really been able to play some of those songs live to people before, not before an audience. This time you have had that luxury. So how has that been a benefit, and how has that been a hindrance to you this time?
Well, that's a very good question. We So although we did get to flesh out some of the songs live, for album one, because basically album one was written sort of over 8 years. Some of the songs, Until I Found a Rose, I wrote that when I was like 18, I think, and it took a long time to get right. But the song eventually sort of came together on the album. So we had time to flesh out some of the songs. But with album two, so many of the songs were written, and we could take them a little bit on tour. We did a couple of shows. We weren't really existing as a live entity when we recorded album two, and so we didn't really get the chance to play them on a full tour in the way that we would have liked to, in the way that I think bands kind of should do. Like my favorite bands these days are bands like Big Thief, who sort of, they'll, like Adrian Lenk will write a song in the morning, and by the evening the band are jamming it on stage.
Yeah.
And that to me feels so natural. And I wish we could have done that, but we're not on tour all of the time. I would love to be, but we're not at the moment. But so a lot of these songs, in the way that they were when I was sort of 18, 19, were played through at open mics and folk nights, and at friends' houses, or I would send demos to my friends, or I would I would go to friends' living rooms and play them to them. So this album's sort of the process of actually getting it right and turning it into a living, breathing song felt a lot more intimate, than album one. Because I got very personal, very upfront opinions about all of these songs by being, a breath away from the people that I was actually playing it to, which was an honor. And the album is definitely more collaborative as a result of that.
Well, listen, just finish off then. Can you briefly tell us what we can expect as a whole from the new album, and when people can catch you live?
As a whole, from the new album, it is a journey in exactly the way that I explained it in the answer before, and that it feels cyclical. There's a lot to do with everyday dread. I make it sound like it's the most miserable album ever. I think the album is full of jokes. It's like there's loads and loads of jokes. There's loads of humor. It's not a comedy album, but there's a lot of humor. My favorite songwriters use humor to a great extent, so there's loads of that. And also, I think it sounds very alive. It sounds breathing. We decided to use a lot of instruments that use breath, that feel very real, that feel very tactile, as opposed to a lot of synths on this album, because we wanted it to sound more human. especially in terms of what's happening these days, and our overall anxieties about like how much there is human left in the world. And that's then transferring to the live shows. The live shows are feeling very vibrant and very energetic. And live, we are going on tour from the 13th until the 29th of November, UK and EU, and we are looking into hopefully playing more and more and more and doing a bunch of stuff next year as well. But at the moment, those are the only dates that I can tell you about.
Brilliant. Well, listen, Sam, it's been a pleasure to meet you. I wish you the best of luck with the album. I can't wait to hear the rest of the songs.
I'll send it
Thanks
over.
so much for your time.
I'll send it over to you. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
I'll send you the record. I didn't realize I hadn't sent you it. I'll send you the album in full.
Oh, okay, yeah, but no, I'll be buying one of those big bundles. I need one of those T-shirts with the tarot on it. It looks great.
Oh, lovely, nice.
So I'll be getting one of those.
Okay, perfect.
So
great questions as well. Thank you so much, Howard.
No, thanks so much, and I hope to if I don't catch you at a gig in the UK, you need to go over to Bilbao sometime soon and play a gig.
Oh, I would love to. I'm
sure they'd appreciate you over here as well.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you so much.
I never make the same mistake twice. If I do, it's an encore.